Susie, maybe we can start, Susie.
Yeah, okay, yeah, so let's start. So good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our webinar today. So my name is Susie Xueqin. So I'm the Assistant Director of the Asia Forest Research Center at UBC. So I'm responsible to coordinate the Biodiversity and the Ecosystem Specialized Committee from the Asia Pacific Young Scientists Association, so in short, ASYA. So today's webinar is organized by ASYA. First, let me shortly introduce ASYA. So it was launched in 2020, aiming to help young scholars with their professional and also personal development and enhance the regional forestry research collaborations. So it is an open platform focused on the Asia Pacific region. It includes 4 specialized committees. So recently, we are also organizing a 3-minute thesis virtual competition. So if you are interested in our activities, you are welcome to visit our website and register as a member. So I will post the website link in the chat box later. So before starting, so I want to inform everyone that the webinar will be recorded and it will be available on our online video platform. So for better sound quality, please keep your microphone muted during the presentation. So in the section of question and answer after the presentation, you can unmute yourself if you have any questions for our speaker, or you can also post your questions in the chat box if you prefer. So today, our keynote speaker is Dr. Ramesh Krishnamurthy. So my apologies again if I did not pronounce the name in the right way. So he is a scientist at Wildlife Institute of India and also the adjunct professor from both Faculty of Forestry at the University of British Columbia and also the ASYA Institute of Technology in Iran. He has been visiting professors at Martin Luther University from Halle in Germany. So he specialized in landscape ecology, spatial recovery strategies, and in integration of technology in wildlife research and management. He's the board member and the country representative of the Association for Tropic Biology and Conservation, Asia Pacific chapter, also founder, secretary, and the president of the Indian Regional Association for Landscape Ecology. He serves in various commissions of IUCN and academic or conservational associations. He was a gold medalist in both under and post-graduation and has also received the Distinguished Foreign Scholar Award by the U.S. Regional Association of the International Association for Landscape Ecology and NASA MSU Professional Enhancement Award by National Aeronautic and Spatial Administration and the Michigan State University from US. So we feel very happy and appreciate that Dr. Ramesh Krishnamurthy accepted our invitation to offer the talk today. Okay, let's welcome Dr. Ramesh to give his talk today, please. I can stop my sharing, so I think you can start.
Thank you, Susie. Thank you, Anil, for this great opportunity to interact with you all. So I'm just going to share my presentation. Usually that's a big challenge.
I think, okay, now you can. Yeah.
Is it visible?
Yes.
Yeah. Is it visible now?
Yeah, we can
Slide
see
rolling?
it.
Yeah. Okay, great. So, yeah, greetings to all of you. Good evening, good morning, wherever you are. And so this is a subject which I've been working on for quite some time. So I thought I'll give you an overview of what's happening in India because as far as the cats are concerned, India is one of the very important countries, to have them and also to protect them. So the story that you hear from India probably will also reflect what's happening around in Asia Pacific. I mean, in a more positive way. So I'll take you through some of the basics about this reintroduction, rewilding of big cats that we have in India, and also give you an overview of what's currently happening. Yeah. So I think we're talking about big cats. Of course, tiger is the key species, iconic species for us, and it's a champion of conservation in India and also 13 other countries across Asia. So therefore, this is a species that I'll be talking mostly about. And very recent addition to this, all this interesting conservation, endeavor is the cheetah, which we never thought that this will come to India, but I think it's arrived in India. It's very safe, and it's created a lot of excitement among scientists and conservationists about its arrival. So nevertheless, it's a very important conservation milestone in the history of India's. If you look at the kind of efforts that we're putting around in the natural resource management. So other very important aspect, which is relevant to many of these countries across Asia where we lost big cats, is about rewilding. So China made an effort rewilding its own subspecies, and many other countries are now interested in bringing big cat back. But since they don't have their own source population, so the rewilding is, one of the options that has been thought about. So we can kind of get to understand what are the issues and even the success of some of these rewilding experiences that we have. So I think it's important to just get some basics about big cats because it's a very loosely used term, but mostly they refer to the two subfamily, Pantherinae and Felinae. So in fact, when you talk about the big cats, it's mostly this 8 species that we talk about. But interestingly, and or more, I would say, the privilege for the people from Asia, we have about almost 6 of them in Indian subcontinent. That way, see, because the big cats also kind of reflection of the kind of the biodiversity value that a system has. So therefore, having to understand the big cats means that we are kind of getting to this details of this ecosystem in entirety. So as I said earlier on, so we have these two subfamily and mostly the Panthera and lion, tiger, jaguar, leopard, snow leopard, cheetah, and cougar. I mean, you all know, very familiar, cougar and jaguar, but all other species, but we are missing cheetah. So I think that's also come now. And of course, we had them in captivity, not in the wild, but now it is in the transition after this translocation from Namibia. So it's a very important big project in India at the moment. With the Prime Minister office personally taking interest. I mean, this is another thing that I want to really highlight. Talking about India's conservation, there has been important support from the political bosses. I think Madam Indira Gandhi, as the Congress government, was instrumental in making the conservation work, and it's bringing more legality to it. So be it the Wildlife Protection Act or creating the tiger reserves. So I think we still have a very strong legacy coming from those the political system. Now with this government pushing for the cheetah, I think it's really giving us a very different dimension as to the political system is taking interest in conservation discourse, which was actually missing. Many of us used to complain that conservation is not one of the priorities among the government, but things are changing, which is a good thing. I mean, we may always debate about what is good or bad, but to me, what is important is getting this attention of the political system back in conservation. And because later on, if there is even if there's any problem, the course correction will be a possibility. So talking about cats, again, as I said about big cats, I would also say the same thing for the cats, because being a carnivore, I mean, wherever the food chain it exists, so these are the species reflects the quality of a system. So having a 16 cats in India, I mean, maybe if you just extend to South Asia, you'll have few other species. And that talks a lot about the system's diversity across the country. So having having these species and also having them in good number also reflects that the prey base, the habitat quality is intact, because cats cannot survive without this whole arrangement of this habitat quality and the prey base and things like that. So when you talk about cat as such, you cannot see them as an individual. So you need to see them as the whole, the spectrum. So therefore, having so many species is a reflection of the kind of diversity and the conservation status in the country. Yeah. So these are the big cats that we have. I mean, of course, the tiger, as I said, is a key species. Then we have a lion restricted in a very small pocket in western part of the country. And leopard is a widespread species. In fact, the population has grown so much now. It's becoming a problem species in some part of the country. And snow leopard, another iconic species in the Himalayan system. Until recently, I mean, we used to always think the snow leopard is very, very rare. But with the use of camera trap, now we are discovering many populations. In fact, they're widespread. Even in terms of elevation, one of my students also been able to record the lowest elevation. So that's another very, very important species. It's also a species conflict in the Himalayas. The other very interesting and very rare elusive species is the clouded leopard, which is mostly found in the northeastern part of the country. Again, like a snow leopard, with more of a camera trap, we've been able to discover the species distribution under the population. And then finally, we have this the snow leopard arriving with very specialized arrangement and with an excellent action plan. In fact, this is an action plan that I would recommend each one of you to read. It's one of the very nice action plan that has been put together for the large cats, because unlike other tiger reintroduction projects, where we identified the source site and then translocation, because this is intercontinental, because this particular species is the behavior is very different. So to have them kind of rehabilitate or reintroduced or introduced or whatever you call it, I think it requires a long-term plan. I think not only about the site, it's also about the kind of the systematic release of them. And of course, it's a very popular project. And this action plan talks about all these details, including its the pros and cons. So I've been repeatedly saying that I want to reiterate the importance of big cats or large carnivores. So we have already seen this example of the cascade effect happening in Yellowstone. I mean, there's a lot of publication that talks about the removal of top carnivore, what happens to them. It's one of the recorded long-term information that is available. But then there are also other examples where we have seen that happening in India, where we lost tiger population in few of the reserves. So the system effect is very, very obvious. I mean, you can see that the system response, or the prey base bouncing back, or prey base is getting controlled in a very short time when you have this large carnivore presence and absences. Because I mean, there are a lot of publication. I think if many of you interested, you can always look at this Yellowstone example for the top order effect onto the system. So in fact, when we talk about the predator, I mean, this is a quote that I taken from Tom, and predators are so important. The removal has such a long lasting effects that it's, maybe it's because it's not very obvious generally when you see this. Okay. But then even when we are trying to rebuild this population, there is always a tendency among people, okay, fine, if you lose the species or lose the population, we have this mechanism that we can bring them back. But it is not as it is that you can reverse the condition that earlier it existed, because these interactions takes place in multiple complexities and through a lot of time scale. So of course we can do a bit, but I think it's very important to protect the species as it is. I mean, although I'm talking about reintroduction, but I also like argue for keeping the species intact before having to reach the situation where you need to reintroduce them. So the issues related to ecologies, as you said, I mean, the system control. You can see, the prey species increasing, decreasing, depending on the large carnivore. So there are enough examples to say that with the presence or absence or increasing, decreasing of this predators, there's a clear effect on other the species, the dependence of the species. So this is not just about an ecological effect. Also, even sometimes it also plays around in economics, depending on where you are, and also impacts or creates a conflict situation if the predator is also not there. So there's a direct human connection to this. It is not just not an exclusive, ecological setting, but it also extends to the human setting as well. So, I mean, when I mentioned economics, I should come directly to this economics of the large carnivores. I mean, I think the money is very important. I think I like this statement: without money, conservation is only a conversation. Yeah. So people do need money when we talk about conservation. So tourism is the biggest player in the world. So in India, at least, we have a tourism contributing to 10% of the GDP. So it's a huge business, but this is what we are seeing is a small proportion of recorded the resources, but there's a lot of unrecorded, unorganized sector around the tourism. But importantly, it's not just about the tourism and the tourism generating the employment. I think it's more importantly expands the constituency for conservation. So when the more people visiting, the more people seeing the beauty of the nature and the magnificent the behavior or the charisma of cats like tiger, I think you're automatically expanding the conservation support, which is very, very important because you may have all of the technical support system resources, but you do not have a large populist support. See, that is clearly is one of the reasons that, how India has been able to maintain conservation leadership. So because the more and more popular support across the board. So, but then the tourism can also be a double-edged sword because if not handled properly, what we call them, if it is not a responsible tourism, it can work against the conservation goals. Because we've seen such situations where the corridor getting affected, or sometimes people just putting pressure on the system. So this can happen. But then, of course, this is something that can be managed with a proper the management principles. So we see this tiger population increasing in, and many of these places which used to be rare, now we get to see them. I think health linkages is often be forgotten with big cats. Okay, so we have recently hearing there's a term called One Health, which is pushed by World Health Organization. But what exactly it means is most of the time when we hear this health is very often we hear from veterinary professional or public health professional. But now after the pandemic and people are getting to understand more of the linkages, now we know this One Health actually means the linking the environment, because that part is just, I mean, it's mentioned in passing by usually, but now it's getting strongly ingrained in the understanding of why environment has to play the big role when we talk about the One Health. So animal plant, in fact, is One Health definition of the WHO. It talks about linking environment, animal and plant health, because that is another aspect which gets neglected in the wilderness and public health. But the big cats play indirect role in safeguarding public health, because the very recent experience is about the recovery of vultures and other scavengers, because presence of big cats enable presence of scavengers, because I mean, species like tiger and lion, so when they predate a large prey. When they predate large prey, they leave out a substantial portion for scavengers. So we can see that connection between these big cats and the scavengers. In fact, there are examples in the absence of vulture. There's increase in public health expenditure because the domestic dog population increased, and thereby getting into more rabies cases. So these records are already available. But then, and similarly, in some of the wilderness areas, we know where the tiger population recovered, and you could see this vulture population recovering. So vulture is a very interesting species. Not only able to keep this forest system clean, they also go beyond. In fact, very recent paper that talks about, also kind of corroborating with our own findings of tagged birds, the vultures feed outside the PAs also, mostly rather. So which means that they provide support, the health support beyond the protected areas. So it's across the large landscapes. So I think these small things, which is not very apparent, but have a very significant effect on the health. So I think, I mean, having said this, the big cats are important, and they are very interesting species, but they also have certain intrinsic characters which make them to be very vulnerable. And because they are very specialized animal, they require large, home range. They depend on the spray base, and they're very sensitive to disturbances. So you do get to see them. So as many of you know, I'm just going to take you through the whole history of what is happening to some of these big cats. So you can see the lion as a species. There's found in Africa if you look at the origin, but in India you can't even see it located. It's a Gujarat, a very small dot, but the population is expanding. I mean, although the habitat is there and restricted, but if you see the recorded number starting from 1936, I mean, the population is kind of almost tripled. So that is why there's a call for creating a second home for them. So they're expanding within the state of Gujarat. But globally, there is a decline. But with this, the Asiatic subpopulation, we see them increasing. And tiger, I think India has been a big leader, and it has played a very, very important role in bringing tiger back to what it is now. I mean, the population crash, many of us know this. I mean, starting with 1973 with Project Tiger, and 2005 with the National Tiger Conservation Authority, and having starting the nationwide population assessment in 2006. I think India has kind of accomplished the commitment it made in St. Petersburg on doubling the tiger number. And yeah, it might be very happy news, but if you just compare it with what it was in the past, you can see this the past distribution and the current distribution of the tiger. I mean, globally, we know that we've lost about almost 95% of this global range. So what we have currently is only a 6%, almost 6% of the historical range where tiger is existing. But globally, India is boasting of having 70% of the global wild tiger population. So it is a good thing. At the same time, it's a huge responsibility on India's shoulder to keep these species survive along, and which is basically happening. And even then, even within country, I mean, there are small pockets where the population also concentrated, which also means that within the country, this disproportionate population distribution makes a certain part of the country to have larger responsibility to make sure what we have achieved over the last 10, 15 years, making this tiger population to triple. I mean, you see currently we about 3,000 of them. I think the rest of the 12 countries will probably add to another few hundreds. So otherwise, I mean, Nepal is another important country to have the tiger population. So this is what happening, but again, globally, the population's decline is very obvious. I mean, India is doing well. Leopard, I mean, the common leopard, it's a very, very shy and elusive and very smart animal, and it's highly adaptable. That is why you can see this across, Africa and Asia, almost all the countries it is surviving. But I mean, IUCN says it's declining. But again, as I said, in India, the population is increasing. You can see the statistic that we got recently between 2014 and 2018. I mean, it's almost double. I mean, it's not a happy news in the sense that when leopard population increases, I think it's also having to increase this interface with the human, because leopard is another intrusive species, unlike tiger. Tiger does not venture so much into human habitation for lifting a cattle or attack on human, but leopard can venture into human habitation to lift goat and pigs and things like that. So yeah, I mean, while again the global situation is of a declining, that is the reason that why IUCN wants it to be vulnerable species. But India, the habitat is, again, as I said, it is not going to increase, but protection is increasing, but the population is increasing. So this is the status. Snow leopard, I mean, it was not that one comprehensive assessment that could be done in the past. As I said earlier on, it's a very, very secretive species, and it's very difficult to cite them because people like us lived a lot of time in the Himalayas, and so I've not seen a snow leopard. I think many of the people who've been traveling across the Himalayas, even Trans Himalayas, where it is in good number, cannot see them because such a shy and camouflaged animal. But as I said, with the camera traps, and we have been getting to have more. But global population, the increase that I shown here, I mean, to me is more of a discovering the population rather than actually population increasing. That's what I would put it. But then general, I mean, consensus among the experts is saying that declining because the data is coming from different reason, because it is another species getting into conflict with shepherds. So there is a direct retaliatory killing. So there are many such evidences across this distribution range in Mongolia, even in the Indian parts of the Trans-Himalaya. So that is how people say the population is increasing. But yeah, this is another species that has taken our attention. Now, the government of India has got project snow leopard. Clouded leopard, again, as I said, is a species of eastern distribution, and the global population has kind of increased. But then there are some pockets they're showing a decline. So that is why it's very difficult to place this species, where is it? And largely because of understanding. We do not have so much information about them. And now with again with the camera trap, I think everybody started using camera trap. So we are getting to know more of them. Yeah, cheetah. I mean, it's a global population again, whether it's the Asiatic cheetah or it's an African cheetah, because this is a different subspecies. But apparently, they evolved from a similar bottleneck in a small population. But Africa, it's a huge population, it's well protected. But in India, I think we all know it's we lost out. But although it is showing us declining population, but I'm not sure, I mean, it is the overall status maybe, but there are concentrations, even Africa. I think it's there because the Asian population, the Asian subspecies, we lost out. And even in Iran, we had a good number in the past. I think there also the population is less increasing. I mean, it's a variable information that we're getting from 20 to 60. So that is really a poor status of the subspecies. So anyway, so this is about the global scene of the carnivore, the population size. I mean, in terms of the habitat, you can see many of those critically endangered endangered species. They've shown something like it's a wolf and tiger, lion. They've gone beyond 90% of the range decline. I mean, that's a very direct information as to what is happening to the species. So maybe some of these the least concerned species only they're there, but actually it works both ways. I mean, maybe they are endangered because the range has been declined, or people are not interested. So you can see these statistics. I mean, very disheartening to know that we are all firefighting with these large carnivores. I mean, across the globe. And the vulnerability extension, why they are vulnerable, I think the habitat is getting lost and fragmented because, as I said, these species require dispersal routes. They need to actually have a genetic exchanges if the habitat is getting fragmented. So it will be an important reason for the population to get insular and isolated. And these isolated populations are prone to extinction. So we have an expansion of roads, agriculture, linear infrastructure. They're all causing to the fragmentation effect. And large carnivores are also killed for sports. I mean, some parts. I mean, they're all killed for body parts, traditional medicines, fur, meat for consumption. I think sometimes live animals are also captured and sold in the market. And they're also facing that effect, that's very organized and unorganized sector where they're going after these big cats. So that is also, you can see in this map, the countries where the habitat loss has been high. And similarly, the utilization has been high. So other thing is about depletion of wild prey species. I mean, people love bushmeat. So in many countries, this is one of the biggest problem. Even in India, before the strong the management action that was put in place after the protected network and with the tiger reserve, So we could experience a lot of the effect on the prey. I mean, bushmeat. So you can see in these maps that the number of prey species getting declined or getting in different parts of the world. So these are also the area where it aligns with the large carnivore decline. So this is one big problem. I mean, while we talk about conservation of big cats, we always talk about how to ensure the prey species needs to be protected as well, because they have a very direct relationship. Conflict is another important driver of big cats population decline, because people, I mean, we've seen some gory pictures in the recent years where people are not afraid when they've lost human life, when they lost their livestock, and they retaliate very hugely. So again, across the globe, I mean, the persecution of this conflict animals also caused a local extinction. It is not just about population decline. Extinction have been caused in many parts. So people poison, trap, and shoot. I mean, they can get into all possible things. That is why, at least in Indian context, we see the human-wildlife conflict as one of the major threats to wildlife. Okay, so in fact, this working group on India's, ecotourism analysis actually talks about human-wildlife conflict as an important thing. And recently, we have the National Wildlife Action Plan that has dedicated a chapter on how to deal with human-wildlife conflict management. So carnivore is among the key species that are involved in the human-wildlife conflict. So infectious disease, this is another area that I said about health being neglected, but it's quite a threat. It's happening. I mean, people have recorded. There's a lot of emerging information. The disease is affecting all carnivores, at least lion, tiger, snow leopard, and cloud leopard. So we've been seeing evidence of these zoonotic diseases. So in fact, the zoonotic diseases can also play around with your domestic animals, and then vice versa. And we do, have situations like large-scale mortality that has taken place in Africa, and also some populations in India. So this is a wake-up call. I mean, although the veterinary professionals have always been talking about it, but I think it's a time now that we need to address this issue. So we have some examples of big cat extinction in India. And starting with the cheetah, you see that the last recorded evidence was 1948, and this was through sport hunting. We lost all of them. In fact, the cheetah used to be a menace in the past. In fact, some part it was even declared as a kind of vermin, the animal to be hunted down. But it went to the extent that it's completely got wiped out. Yeah. So this is a story from the 17th century. We used to have a lot of them, and across the country. And they say even in the earlier part of the century, we had more than 200 cheetah roaming around the country. So the princely states are closely involved in sport hunting. I think they have been responsible for making this species to go extinct. And the lion, again, so we had wide distribution in northern part, and we are talking about Asiatic lion, but then got restricted to very small sanctuary, the Gir National Park. Now it's expanding population. So, but then as you see here now, they're expanding in terms of the range locally. So this was another species that I would say that a lot of local extinction has taken place. Tiger, again, it's although I mentioned there's a very good news about the population declining, but then the range size has always been restricted. So you can see the number of this administrative unit that had a tiger in the past now restricted to very small pockets, and with the tiger population getting concentrated. So two important cases that I wanted to highlight: Sariska tiger is in Rajasthan, Panna tiger is Madhya Pradesh, where we lost the population totally, and that kind of brought us into focus that the conservation discourse in India needs to connect with so many things, including the administrative community, different agendas. So this is a book which is in a public domain. I would recommend everybody to see it. The Joining the Dots is a part of this investigation report done in a fairly quick time of 6 months by an expert team. So they really talked about the reasons and then what needs to be done to restore the tiger population. I think that led to some of the recovery. So in fact, the Sariska, when we lost the tiger, It was in 2005. And then after that, we have National Tiger Conservation Authority. Whereas in Panna Tiger Reserve, which is in central India, so we lost the tiger population in 2009, where, I mean, I've been involved in this reserve for since then, in fact, 2008 onwards. So I was fortunate to see the last tiger. I was also unfortunate to see the last tiger disappearing. And we are involved in bringing the tiger back through a species recovery plan. So there are experts these days also saying that, if the current situation continues, and what is the extinction probability of these individuals across country. So you can identify the spots where the probability of extinction for tiger in the next 50 years or next 100 years. So that is a kind of a warning, early warning kind of situation for us to address. I mean, it is a prediction, but it may not be the case if the management works well. I mean, which is at least for the tiger conservation and National Tiger Conservation Authority is doing an amazing job of putting things together, and also kind of evaluating. Currently, there's management effectiveness evaluations happening, which also talks about the bottlenecks and then where there is a areas of improvement. So I think the collective efforts are happening. So we have been involved in reintroducing them. So I think globally, you can see that reintroduction is not a new thing. It's happening across the countries. I remember when I looked at the statistics, the earliest reintroduction was 1930s. So this is, I think, the experience of reintroduction, rewilding across the globe has been happening for different species. In India, I think there was an effort in 1995. So the Salar Curzon introduced lion cubs, but then it didn't work out. Similarly, other failed attempt in 1957. I mean, people may not know this. This was other translocation that happened in Uttar Pradesh, Chandraprabha Wildlife Sanctuary, Varanasi. Again, it did not provide the results, and the project is supposed to be failed. But again, in 94-95, the Wildlife Institute of India took up a study to look at which are the sites where lions can be relocated, so creating a second home. They identify 5 of those. Kunu Palpur is one site which is being talked about for lion, where the cheetah has arrived. So in Sariska, we introduced tigers. I mean, you can see this population is growing, but it's not as fast as one would have experienced. But then this effort has been successful, and population is surviving, and from 0 now 20 plus. So the other reserve where Panna Tiger Reserve, but the result is really amazing, from 0 to 60 now. So this is supposed to be one of the fastest large car recovery site anywhere in the world, if I can say that. But not only that, it's also kind of now come to a term as any other tiger reserve. So the population dispersing, and I mean, it's looking like anything like a normal situation where the tiger population should have been. It is not like one of the evolving. Already about 20 plus animals have dispersed out. New sites have been occupied. So this is another important story that we have, which other range countries are taking note of and want to emulate. So both within India and outside India, there are interests for this tiger reserve. I mean, as to how this happened, and in such a short time, we could recover the tiger population back to this. So this is some images of monitoring these very nice animal. You could see this the first litter. I mean, there are 4 of them, which I showed you in the earlier picture. So 2 survived, and then they are dominating now. So you can see this whole transformation that is taking place with the reintroduction effort. And we also have some challenging, or I would say so-called failed attempts. I mean, this also gives us a more opportunity to learn. I mean, even though we have been able to succeed in tiger conservation, there are also situations still plague us as to how we need to be even more better prepared. So the place called Satkocha in eastern part of country, there was an effort to translocate, but unfortunately we lost one of them to poaching. The other one got into conflict. I mean, that had to be brought back. So while we talk about 2 of the very successful sites, this is one of the failed site, I mean, at this point in time, but I'm not given up on the hope, because the habitat is still intact, the support system intact, the government is serious. So we need to just step back and review, and then maybe look at all the problems and go with the positive things. So again, as I said, despite the population, there are several sites the population density is low of tiger. I mean, these are the tiger reserves that I listed here, and where augmentation or reintroduction of the tiger is happening. I mean, so if you actually accomplish all this, I think we're going to be adding a substantial number of tiger populations. So we talked about 3,000 now. So we'll be adding probably another 1,000, I would say, easily, if all of them are going to be yielding to this optimal carrying capacity. So I think what Indian experts of conservation says, India can possibly have about 5 to 6,000 tigers, but with a certain restricted carrying capacity. So we need to wait and watch and how these areas also respond. So reintroduction of cheetah, I think it's a big news. But then the big news has also come with the controversies. But of course, conservation has always been like that. And to me, I think we need to embrace every situation, what is given. But if you look at the history of this, I think the discussion started taking place 1965 onwards. In fact, 57, I would say, 52 and 56 and 57. These are the top layer where the cheetah is a crisis happening. Then there was an effort to rebuild, and then in between you had this effort of bringing a lion to this site. So, but then there's a lot of litigations, but then the court has given a verdict. Now, finally, in 2022, the first batch of the cheetah have arrived. Arrived very well, and it's coordinated by all very nicely. And I can, as I say, you see this fantastic these two images of how the one image where the former minister, that's Ramesh, is actually going there to Africa and seeing that how cheetah can be brought in. There was an action plan that was developed in 2009. But now Prime Minister Modi is taking this leadership and making sure that cheetah arrived. He himself went to this place to release it, and then you can see this
Dr. Ramesh, can you hear me? So now I think we lost your voice.
How's the sound?
Maybe there might be some problem.
Yeah. Okay, let's wait for some minutes. I think he got some technical problems, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, he's back.
Yeah.
Sorry, I think I lost out of the network.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just.
Now it's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just. Is it okay now, Susie?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, I was actually talking about the cheetah. This is the cheetah that was brought in. One of the cheetahs that was brought in, and these are the team of people who've been involved in making this possible from the political system, led by the Prime Minister himself and our Forest Minister and our current director, Dr. S.P. Yadav, who's also the current project director. And we had this very big team from Africa. There's a cheetah conservation fund and our wildlife institute team. You can see there's the researcher and the scientist, because Dr. Jala has been part of this one from the beginning. It makes it very clearly that it's one of those what I call the first time probably the large carnivore has been shifted intercontinentally. So we're just excited and waiting for things to happen. So other important quick example I want to rush through is about rewilding experiences, because orphaned cubs, orphan tigers, when a population increases, when infighting takes place, these things happen. So sometimes the human intervention is required. So this is a cub of 3 weeks old where it was rescued in central India and was rehabilitated in this small facility, and then it got rewilded in a large facility. So later on, it was brought to a natural area. So this has also been an important experience for the country, where these rescued cubs could actually be rehabilitated. And it's, although, I mean, the success rate may be different, but then it does contribute to conservation. So we have experience of this in place. So this is again a picture that is given by one of my student. So how the interaction, we could actually see that the T4, T5 is actually the captive one. So they could interact restrictively, but whereas the wild bonds interact wildly. So there are, of course, some limitations of the wild ones, but then the contributions cannot be negated. So we also have several other cases of orphan cubs being rehabilitated and taken to different parts of the country. So Nora Dehi Wildlife Sanctuary in Madhya Pradesh is another place where this has happened. And the Maharashtra, we had some cubs have been rehabilitated, but unfortunately this could not see its life. But then the technical support system is there. Very recently in the southern part of the country, Tamil Nadu, there's one cub that has been rehabilitated under the surveillance now. So the male, and it's going through the training process. Yeah, so these are some of the things that I wanted to really highlight. But this is my last slide. So what I wanted to stop at here is, we have, I mean, across the globe, I mean, even here, we have this good, bad, ugly experience of reintroduction and rewilding. So very often this has been questioned. I mean, oh, this is a successful model, this is a failed model. But I think I wanted to underscore here, I mean, all the effort that happens in the conservation is an effort towards, the rebuilding process. So therefore, conservation cannot be just put into this dichotomy of success or failure. So I think to me, it is a process. I mean, it's not destination itself. Whatever we do, it's sometimes you learn, sometimes basically adopt, because conservation is not just about science. I mean, it has its politics, it has its own economics. Therefore, as a professional, many of us who are involved in conservation, we need to keep those things also in mind, that it's a complete thing. It's not just about science. Yeah. So I think that is what I want you guys to leave, but we have had all these experiences. So thank you so much again for listening. I'll be happy to take up any question if it is there. Of course, the others can also reach out to me separately. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ramesh, for offering us a great talk. So now we open the question and answer section. If you have any questions, please unmute your microphone.
Ramesh, thank you so much for your excellent talk. It's quite amazing. I got a question for you. I was involved with Southern China tiger reintroduction in the province of the Meifashan National Park, but finally it's a fail. So it's the ones based on, they say you need to have big area in China. It's quite similar as India, is so crowded. So we cannot get enough land to do it. And the second thing is it's so opposed by the local farmer, local resident, not only farmer. Just say if the tiger we introduce, they probably get a threat to the not only animal or the livestock, but also the human. So what I guess I just want to know what the Indian can solve that kind of problem. Is any way, because the habitat, the scale of the habitat, and a support of the local government, resident, all those farmers.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Wang. Good to see you after a long time. So I think I'm aware of this South China experience, but I think what had happened was it was an experiment tried in Africa, and it was supposed to be brought in China.
Yes.
I think I would, I mean, rather feel that, this is not that rewilding, we need a large space to start with. It needs to incrementally start. In fact, this one of the experience that I said, these two cubs stayed in a quarantine facility for 2.5 years. I mean, it may not be great, but it is what the fact was. Then it got translocated into a larger space. So I would say, I think the South China experience and the Southern Subsidy experience can restart. I mean, unfortunately, we need to find where the individuals are. So maybe once we have them only, it's possible for us to see. But like for Cambodia, they know that their Indo-Chinese tiger is not there. Now they are trying to source tigers from India. So that thought process also should be working around, because the subspecies concept is still being discussed. So I would say maybe the China, if they can start the process instead of taking them to Africa and then bring it back, I think we should start in China itself. The second, as you asked about, I think there is always a support. I think, even now China, the situation is different. There's a larger support for conservation. I think earlier it was not one of the priority. Now the government is certainly realizing that, I mean, China always wants to be the leader, and now seeing a lot of things happening around. I recently hear that, the China is interested in rebuilding the tiger population. So I think what I noticed with all the 13 countries, so I think the Global Tiger Forum is playing a great role in bringing countries together. If China can work with the Global Tiger Forum, probably we should start getting those success in China also. Yeah, I should talk about it later, in detail.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah. I think I have a question in the chat, right?
Yeah, I think I do.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please, Professor.
Now, I think it's fascinating. I really liked your talk very much, but I'm sort of wondering about the long-term situation, whether many of your protected areas are quite small, so getting to some sort of equilibrium where you have an appropriate balance between apex predators and prey, so that you get the right mix of animals, is going to be quite a challenge. I was thinking of the Yellowstone experience with wolves, where it sort of has been documented nicely and it seems to work reasonably well. And you're getting vegetation coming back and it's having impacts on the populations of other things. Are you able in some of the Indian parks and reserves to try and do this, or are you always going to have to control the populations and manage them quite closely?
Jeff, thank you for asking this, because I think this would be immediately for everybody's mind, because India, despite the population growth that we have, we still are in the path of carrying capacity. But secondly, as a policy, Government of India actually, even as a legislation, there is a tiger conservation plan, which needs to take into account this entire protected area and also the corridor. So now when we talk about corridor, I mean, it is a slightly dicey thing, but it cannot be made protected. So the community support is required. So the landscape context is now increasingly talked about. So the National Wildlife Action Plan talks about it. So we are hoping that, I mean, that philosophy will percolate to the ground. So which means that more community engagement, because earlier the idea of, engaging the communities with, very strong means no more there. It's a lot voluntary these days. Community participation is looked at as an important conservation support system. So I think that is where I can see, but I don't know of other situations that will happen. I mean, what is around in Yellowstone, because unlike Yellowstone, India has got several such Yellowstones. So it's going to be I think it can't be just a national policy alone. I think there's also provincial government, the state government also have to play their own game. So I see that happening at the policy and the functional level, but later on we need to see how this can be taken forward. I don't have a complete answer to that second part. So there is a question in the question box. So
yeah,
maybe
I can read it out,
no problem. So will the cheetah be the only big cat in Kunu, or are we looking at having the Asiatic lion there too in the long term? So if so, after how long should the lion be introduced? I think this is, to me, I mean, of course, this is what experts are suggesting. It should be difficult to answer this by anyone, because when you're building a large cat reintroduction, you need to see the progress through. So we cannot just, even for the cheetah itself, although the action plan talks about what may be happening, it will not happen like that. So there's always an adaptive strategy. You need to see the direction of this population response. So sometimes you might want to bring more, sometimes you don't want to bring. So I think this would have to wait. This question cannot be answered at this point in time. But yes, the intention is there. And there's already been talk that, why can't we create the situation like what we have in Africa here also? So that is what I would say. And the second part, I think community managed, I'm not sure, but I think community is going to play a big role, because one of the agendas is also going to be enhance the tourism, because cheetah definitely is going to bring that rush. So of course the communities are going to play a big role. But yeah, I mean, once population, the individuals are released in the wilderness and naturally dispersing, we'll have to see how it goes. Then whether how the community can manage is something that we need to prepare ourselves for.
Okay. I have also one question, maybe two questions. So about the you have mentioned that like a tiger and the lions, they have different patterns. So like lions, they have maybe increasing population, but within very restricted habitat. But for the tiger, like reducing population, but with a very like a large like habitat. So what's like the main factor for the different pattern? So is it because the animal itself, or from like a environmental effect?
So the lion question, that is basically with a good protection, because again, the state of Gujarat always taken a pride in lion. There's a lot of investment. In fact, the prime minister was the chief minister of the state. So there's been a lot of push for the conservation there. The population is increasing, the locally it's expanding. So the pride factors definitely enabled the lion to flourish, okay, despite its problems. But with the tiger, I think tiger occurs across a diverse habitat, diverse situation. I think socio-economic, socio-political situations different. So that could be the reason in the past where the range has got constrained. But the population as such in all the places increasing, because it's now nationally governed, because the conservation in India is, I would say, concurrent. So the responsibility, both the federal and the provincial government. So nobody can actually kind of fiddle around. So the National Tiger Conservation Authority is playing a important leadership, making sure all the tiger reserves, we have the 52 of them, is doing well. So there's a lot of monitoring. So I think wherever they are protected, these tigers are actually doing well. Okay, they are in fact expanding beyond the, I mean, we are talking about 30% of the tiger population actually lives outside the protected area. So that is why the Tiger Conservation Plan talks about a landscape plan as a third chapter. So they have the core plan, there's a buffer plan. There's also landscape plan, although they call it, it's a corridor plan, but it's more of a landscape plan. So yeah, I think I would say it's site specific.
Okay, thank you. I have another question about the genetic diversity. So like for many wild big animals, they have like problems. They are all range from like 1 or 2 or just few adults. So I'm not sure if the tiger also have this problem. So like they have shared, parents, and then the genetic diversity, like they are very low. So do you think for the like cat or tiger or lions, do they have this problem, or is it a problem for the cat, wild cat?
No, maybe it's a problem for the lion, but I think genetic diversity also comes with the risk comes with the exposure to different environment. But even the lion with the insular population, but they're getting exposed to more environmental variation. So, I mean, that is maybe a concern in terms of genetic. But when it comes to, I think, tiger, because tigers are dispersing. In fact, the genetic heterogeneity, generally large cat is not very big, but then even if they are able to exchange once in 2 years, 3 years, it should be sufficient. So because in many places, even the insular populations, so we modeled the genetic impact on the population decline. So we see that even with the current situation, even without any genetic influx, so the population should survive 70 years. So that's the population viability modeling that we are aware of. But all the populations, they are in a way connected. They do. Even once in 4 years, if a male gets into other population, I think it should be kind of offsetting this the deleterious effects of the genetics. So I think with the tiger, we are not concerned as much. But of course, this is something to be watched out for, and it needed to be monitored. But thankfully, the monitoring mechanism that the government of India has put in place also includes the genetic, the population monitoring. So they are all quantifying the conservation genetic situations. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I think we have a few questions on the chat box.
Yeah.
So one is about this is about comment wildcats are important for corn. I think this is a but the government is working with the communities, because even the action plan that I mentioned about, as a separate chapter is mandated to do a community engagement program. Compensation is important part of the. I think you're kind of indicating that we need to work more proactively with people, which I totally agree. I think that is something that we need to do. I mean, there are a lot of NGOs are also playing a big role in this. I think WLF and WCT in India. So these are organizations I can see more proactively these days to engage in the communities. So I would say, yeah, yes to that. And the second question again related to cheetah. So Garazan, which is very. So if the cheetah population does increase, won't the total range governed by available grassland in India, which is very limited, won't this need to be created if and when the cheetah took more and more promising in terms of increased number? See, this is again a hypothetical, but I think it is also an expected question, because when your habitat is limited, I think the population increase also will be limited. It will not possibly increase like what happens in Africa. So it will be limited. So we expect that it should actually, the equilibrium should be playing around. But yeah, I think there's also going to be partly fenced. It might happen to avoid the conflict. Yeah, I think I had a lot of.
Is there more questions?
Maybe I can ask a question, Ramesh.
Of course, yeah, of course.
As you know, right? So in Nepal, we this recent tiger population, double, triple, and so before that there was a lot of positive vibe in and around, like many different layers about increasing the population of tiger, in the political level, also of course, for among the conservation organization, both government and non-government, as well as at the local level as well. So there was a lot of positive vibe, to support for conservation of tiger and increase their population. But recently, what we are observing is, because of increase in tiger number, there is also a lot of, I think, many-fold increase in human-tiger conflict, especially not only in the protected area, but also, outside protected area in buffer zone. So now we are slowly looking at, some like not some, actually worrisome, issues, and particularly some local people, as well as some political support is, slowly kind of, I would say, decreasing. And now we are, I think there is a, discussion about the carrying capacity, like how many tigers that we should have, so
Yeah.
that, we coexist together without, having a lot of negative impact on both tiger as well as for people. I don't know, like if that kind of, discussion, change in the vibe among, those many different layer in India is happening. I don't know, like is that kind of, a discussion is already started, or still maybe after a few years, some of your thoughts.
Yeah, so Anil, Nepal is a very specific case because Nepal also declared zero poaching. Some point in time, Nepal also declared double the tiger population. But I think the Nepal, the limitation is only the Tarai habitat, because now the tigers started ranging to higher elevation, but that is not going to be viable. But whatever we have in the Tarai. So I think you're absolutely right in the sense that conservation discussion. That is why I said conservation is not a destination; it is a process. So what you see as success, it can also be a problem. So it needs to be seen through. So I always want that point to be gotten across. It is a kind of an endeavor that we need to continue to engage. So India, we have not reached that kind of national discussion, but definitely there is a question of carrying capacity. People now want to highlight and come up with the carrying capacity and then say what is the carrying capacity of which the tiger reserve. But this is again dicey because carrying capacity is also kind of worked around. Sometimes you are improving habitat, you increase in habitat carrying capacity. So it needs to be reviewed. So that is where we feel this landscape kind of strategies is going to work. Even though we've been talking about landscape both in India and Nepal, but we have not got on the ground as a governance model. There is no single, we have a Tarai landscape, we've been talking for the last 25 years. But if you ask what exactly the landscape work, we only have an understanding the landscape, but the governance is not there. So I think that might force us, both India and Nepal, to look at a conservation model, which is beyond predatory model. Because as we know, 30% of the tigers are actually outside the PAs. So I think because your situation, because of the small size, and if any impact can actually get into the national level, but India also it happens, but sometimes people locally handle it. We are moving towards it, but that can be handled through these landscape strategies. That's what I feel.
Thank you.
Okay, is there more questions?
Yeah, I think it's a dinner time for you guys and breakfast time for us.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so if we have no more questions, then thank you, Dr. Ramesh, again for your great talk. Yeah, it offers us a lot of knowledge about wildlife conservation, especially for the wildcat. So I hope that we can meet sometimes again to hear more about your work and your study. Okay, thank you also everyone for the discussion and the questions, and thank you for everyone to join us today. So I hope you enjoy the talk, and thank you, and see you next time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr.
Bye-bye.
Ramesh.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good night.
Thank you, Ramesh.
Good night. Have a good day to others. Yeah, bye.
Yeah. Bye. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.
Have a nice weekend.